Yellow.
Talk to me. Talk to me. It's been 30 years. It's been 40 years.
While there are, of course, so many responsibilities and roles as a cinematographer, lighting is one of the easiest areas to get stuck on or just a little overwhelmed when beginning to work in the commercial industry.
Hey Field General, it's me, Nike, by Chris Gibbs, and I'm here to talk to you today about the Field General by Nike.
Peace, y'all, Jamie Benson.
As a cinematographer, your job is also to figure out how to problem solve to create the images you need with the limitations that you might have on the day or on location. So today, I want to walk you guys through some simple approaches to lighting for a commercial by breaking down a branded piece that I got to DP for Nike in collaboration with Union Los Angeles for the release of their new shoe, the Field General. This was essentially an episode in a series called Behind the Design on the Nike Sneakers app, where you kind of get this inside sort of docu-style look at the story and design process of the shoe with the creators. I've shot a few of these over the years with this production company. They're always a lot of fun. I mean, shooting for Nike is a pretty incredible thing, even though this is just kind of like a social asset, but can definitely be a bit on the challenging side. The productions are usually really fast and kind of short turnarounds and timelines, typically only a day to shoot, very limited time with talent. A good friend of mine, Tom Bender, was the director for this project. He's kind of the main commercial director that I've worked with over the last like 5 years. And this time around, he planned out a pretty cool concept for the intro, this little narrative skit, kind of on this like heated phone call conversation inspired by this classic 90s movie scene from Snatch.
We're going to London. Do you hear that, Doug? I'm coming to London.
On this particular shoot, our biggest restriction was pretty limited crew. My gaffer, Andy, was working by himself, so one person to do grip and electric, it's a lot of work. So with that in mind, I had to think through how to best maximize the use of every single one of our lights in order to actually get through our shot list and schedule on time. So let's dive into one of the first setups here. This coach's office scene with our main character kind of kicked back on the desk on this phone call. There's a lot going on in this frame. It's probably one of my favorite shots from this year. You might be surprised that this room was actually completely bare. This was a tiny little office space. I think it's more of a closet, to be honest. And yeah, not to mention white walls. So immediately for me, the challenge with shooting a space like this becomes figuring out ways to create depth and shape within the shot. For this whole project, the primary deliverable is intended for vertical. Framing is kind of weird. It's just a little bit of a headache. Like you either have to rotate your camera and shoot vertically. I typically prefer to shoot horizontal and then just anticipate cropping the image in post. The double-edged sword to this though is that when you are shooting wide, you are physically seeing more within a space. What then becomes the challenge is set decoration and making everything within the shot look good, look like it's a part of the story. The production designer and the art department did an incredible job with this setup, making this space feel really busy, like so much going on, so many cool textures and pops of color, all of these elements to make this space feel like just an iconic 90s, early 2000s coach's office, like locker room vibe. So over on the left of our frame here, we do have this window, which was letting in some pretty nice light, but it didn't really do much for the space, and it was just kind of washing out the contrast with all of the white walls. So in order to minimize the ambient light coming in, we just blocked out the window except for just kind of one small slit. You can actually see it in the corner of the frame. I wanted us to be able to motivate our light source coming from this daylight window. We used a 600X with a spotlight to create a nice little narrow sunbeam directed right at his desk. We had art department place this white calendar just in front of him, and we effectively get this nice table bounce. This helps to create contrast in the space because it's a relatively small light source that's being reflected into the room, and it feels really organic and motivated. We also did use a bit of haze to kind of help lift the shadows and also add some shape to the sunbeam coming in, but I will say it was a little bit difficult to control the level of haze throughout all of our takes because it was a fog machine that we just kind of blasted into the room and just wafted it and let it settle. So a little bit of a production mistake there. After the main dialogue scenes, we ran a few takes of handheld B-roll with the talent just kind of interacting with the shoe. Daniel Fontanetti kind of co-DP'd this with me. He took over for the bulk of operating on the B-roll shots. He's got an amazing eye for those unique camera angles. Definitely check out his work below. I really love getting the chance to to work with other camera operators and kind of taking a step back from the camera to really focus on the image and the scene, making sure the lighting and the framing is best serving the story and giving the director what he's looking for. So over the years as a DP, slowly taking on higher budget work, one thing that I've been needing to get better at and I'm actively improving on this year is my bookkeeping. Kind of difficult building a freelance business, learning this from scratch. What I've been doing to get ahead with this is using Skillshare. I'm honored to partner with a brand like Skillshare. It's one of the largest online learning communities filled with things like film and video, freelance, video editing, productivity, design, like you name it. There is incredibly in-depth and unique information on just about any creative skill nowadays. In case you didn't know, I had the honor of creating a Skillshare original series all about freelance and video editing. And my favorite part about it is that at one fixed monthly cost, you can watch my classes, but also everything, all the content on Skillshare. So learn anything and everything. So if you guys want to take advantage of this, the first 500 people to use my link below will get a free 1-month Skillshare membership. Do me a favor and check it out. It helps support the channel and helps me make more of these videos. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Now, our other character on the other end of the line, we had outside in this phone booth. Art department brought this thing in and we kind of staged it in this back maintenance area behind the building. It's like a school that we were shooting at. Originally, we were gonna do it in a much more clean setting, but we saw this whole just like maintenance yard. The director and I fell in love with it, so we stuck the phone booth in the middle. It's a little messy, there's a lot going on, but I don't know, I kind of liked how it played into the story and contrasted with the coach's office. The weather ended up being pretty dull and overcast, which typically wouldn't be ideal, but if it had been a clear day, probably 10:30, 11 in the morning, the sun would have been pretty much blasting from overhead and really hard to control. The overcast sky was giving him a pretty good key and fill already, but I just wanted him to pop a little bit more from the background. We ended up using the Nanlux 1200B with a spotlight from really far left outside of frame, just to basically give him sort of a back edge light. So we had this set at, I think 100% at 5600 Kelvin, which gave us kind of a subtle warm edge against the sky, which is probably like 6500 Kelvin. For the main interview, we used actually the DZO Vespid 25mm on the FX3 as our A camera, and then 24-70s on our B and C cameras. For interview shots in particular, framing this wide is a little bit funky. The small gym that we shot in had these really beautiful but absolutely massive windows that were kind of along all of the outer walls. Initially, of course, my brain wanted to lean toward blocking a bunch of the windows out and placing a large soft key source, just like a typical book light for an interview setup. But with the limited time and also just limited solid material to be able to block out that many large windows, we again leaned into the ambient light of the space by basically keeping the windows as our main key source and then just shaping some hard light hits across Talent. We used the 1200B with the spotlight and then also the 600X with the spotlight, and we set the color temperature a little bit warmer than daylight. I think it was around like 4500 or maybe 5000 Kelvin. It creates this pretty nice look that still feels interesting. It still has some nice separation from the Talent and the background. It's definitely not my favorite look or my ideal way of how I would have approached the shot, but controlling the space and really bringing this light to life would have meant a heavy lift on time and resources, blacking out all of those windows with solids and then, placing in our desired key light, not to mention the mirrors and all of the background of the shot. It pretty much would have been impossible to avoid seeing lights or stands in the frame. Not exactly as polished as I would have liked it to be, but again, that's kind of the job as a DP. Make it look good within the time that you have. Now, for one of our final setups, we planned some of these B-roll or product moments with the shoes in this locker room. There was a few extra actors that came in and were kind of just pulling the shoes out of the box, just this fun little product moment. Art department again came in so clutch with some amazing set decoration, really bringing the locker room vibe to life. Daniel went absolutely crazy in here with a ton of super unique shot ideas and crazy camera movements. We got really lucky for lighting with these frosted windows on the back wall that were super easily accessible from the outside. We just basically repurposed the 1200B that we had earlier and shifted it around to this side of the building and fired it through the glass with, I think the 45-degree reflector just acting as our big soft backlight that kind of key lit the space. Andy also threw a few Astera tubes overhead with magnets, which kind of gave us a little bit of a top light and also kind of helped illuminate the lockers. And this configuration, of course, gave us full 360 shooting ability, so it was super quick and efficient for Daniel to jump in there and knock out all of the B-roll that we needed. Quite a few of them we didn't even get to use in the final edit, but it was a ton of fun shooting with him. I love seeing people push creative boundaries and sometimes getting a little off script and just kind of going for it in the last final minutes. And so shout out to Daniel for all of the amazing shots and the hustle. With every project, you're not always gonna have the opportunity to create exactly the shot that you want or light the way that you want. With an open mind and a little bit of planning and strategy, you can create some pretty bold and interesting looks with very minimal lights or time and resources. It just comes down to careful composition and shaping your light to really bring it to life. Hopefully this gives you guys some cinematography ideas for your next shoot or your next project. That's all I got for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.